Can I ask you to share with us briefly what is compassion and how does it differ from self-compassion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we make the assumption that everyone knows what we mean when we say compassion, or we all think we know what we mean when we say compassion.
Is compassion something that is better understood intellectually?
You know, it might be the difference between reading a book about love and being in love. That many of us have an inner critic that beats us up, that does everything the opposite of self-compassion, is hard on us. And it really is a huge burden to carry. The need to be compassionate and to be self-compassionate in particular, that seems to be relatively universal.
In a few moments, we'll be talking about other kinds of difficult emotions. For example, what's called climate anxiety. And so we'll ask a few questions later about if compassion can help us hold those feelings. But now, if I may, I would like to go to the second part of the interview, which is to ask you to speak of the 3 A's of compassion. I've heard that you've given some talks on this. The 3 A's, if you described it, are awareness, acceptance, and action. I just wondering if you could give us a small recap of the core ideas there.
Yeah, I would say that the 3 A's sort of apply to what I think of as part and parcel of the same thing, but they're talked about in 2 different ways, is mindfulness and compassion. So mindfulness is sort of moment to moment, non-judgmental awareness, the ability for us to be present in the moment. And when we are present in the moment, our natural capacity for compassion is there as well. So, so what we've had over the last 30 years, maybe 40 years, at least here in the West, in the US, has been an awareness of a growing kind of, I don't want to call it a fad, but it's certainly a huge explosion in awareness of contemplative practice and mindfulness specifically, and compassion as well. And what's kind of evolved in that period of time are these sort of 3 phases that I see of the practice of mindfulness and compassion. So the first piece is awareness, like you said, which means just waking up to how we struggle, where we struggle. There's a program called mindfulness-based stress reduction that was really the foundation for mindfulness in the West, and now pretty much in the world, around just tuning in to how do we create our own suffering? How actually that how we look at things influences how we feel, basically. And if we can begin to be aware of our surroundings, aware of our reactivity, our old patterns that like fight, flight, freeze, all kinds of different things, that old habitual ways that we get ourselves into trouble in various ways, that when we sort of wake up to that, then we can actually do something. We can see, oh, my suffering, for example, about pain, is actually not that I have pain, but to a certain degree, the fact that I have it and I'm resisting it. I want it to be different. So first we had to wake up. And so that was the awareness aspect of this practice. We start to tune in when we first start to meditate or practice mindfulness. We notice, wow, my mind is active. It's all over the place. It gets stuck, it gets lost. I get lost in thought. I get all these feelings come and go. So first is just getting to know the territory, awareness. The second piece is once you're aware, then you kind of start to tune in to where you can make internal changes so that things don't affect you in the same way. And that's when you can begin to accept. And that's not surrender. Sometimes when people hear acceptance, they think of surrender like, oh, it just is what it is. It's always going to be this way. I might as well just give up. That's not what we're saying with acceptance. We're saying, can we accept that what is here and not resist it just because it's here? So the example that I really like to use is in regard to pain. I had a person who took a mindfulness course from me a long time ago, had tons of chronic pain. And he said, he took a mindfulness course and it just changed his life. And the reason it did was, he said, I'm a fighter. He says, I grew up here in the US in Detroit. It's a tough city. And I just learned to fight from a young age. I'd fight with kids in the neighborhood. I joined the wrestling team and I fought my way to the top of my weight class. And then I joined the football team, and my coach, forced me into the game, and I had to fight my way to the varsity, and I would have to go in playing hurt and injured and all the rest. And then I fought my way to the top of my profession. He was in the sales field. And then I had this injury, and I'd been fighting with my chronic pain for 15 years. And he said, what I learned in the practice of mindfulness was that it was possible for me to dance with my pain. So you can just feel the difference between fighting and dancing. The pain is there in both cases, but the relationship is different. It's no longer resisting the reality of something. It's actually finding a way to live around the reality of it, to find a rhythm that allows you to live and have pain rather than to resist, put everything on hold until the pain goes away. So acceptance is the part of that, being able to accept the reality of it. So this all fine, awareness, acceptance. But there's another part of this, that when we can become aware and we can realize there's certain things we can't change, then we can accept those things we can't change. But then there is also, well, what about the things that we can change? And this is where I think we are as a whole field now, as we've evolved from awareness, through awareness and acceptance. Not like those went away, those are still super powerful. But is it possible for us then on that foundation to take action, to not just accept everything passively, accept the things we can't change, but then have the courage to change the things we can? So there's this serenity prayer in the 12-step, substance abuse recovery field. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So what is it that could cultivate the courage to change the things I can? And this is where I think mindfulness, or compassion, comes in. This is where, if we can create a sort of safe, brave space within us, a platform, if you will, for movement, for change, compassion is what actually fuels action. We are aware, we accept the things we can't change, and we have the courage to change the things we can, because we can tolerate how we feel inside. And that's it again, like compassion cultivates a kind of safe space because we learn to meet ourselves with kindness, but it also cultivates a brave space. When we feel safe, then we can take action. If we don't feel safe, we're afraid. We don't want to go out on a limb. We don't want to push ourselves. We just want to hunker down and protect ourselves. But when we feel compassion, inner and outer compassion, then we can actually take action. And I think that's where, like, this whole awareness of mindfulness and compassion leads us to be able to make significant change, whether it's social justice, whether it's the environment, as we're talking about, whether it's inequality and how genders are being treated, all the different kinds of problems that we really have in the world. When there is self-compassion, there is this potential for action.
I love that, and I concur. I can't tell you how much I concur. I feel that my sense is that compassion really motivates us to change, to take different actions. And I think it energizes us to take different actions, to live differently. Once we have the, like you say, the strength and then the courage to live differently. And that's really where I'm hoping this series of interviews will take us, is to, how can we live differently? I look at the world around us and I see that for the most part, many of us disregard the consequences of our choices and actions in the environmental sense.
Mm-hmm.
Irresponsibly, if I could put it that way, maybe too much. We're not careful in how we choose and consume, etc. So, and we continue to do that day after day after day after day. So what will foster change? What will trigger a change and give us the grounding, the motivation, the intrinsic motivation, the energy to change? And my sense is one of the big pieces to that will be compassion. When we're motivated by compassion to heal the earth. And I feel that healing ourselves is one part of healing the earth, and healing our earth is one part of healing ourselves. So it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle. Would you concur? Would you like to give some other comments on how healing our earth through compassion could be a way to live differently?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to think about, because I do think, first of all, Marshall Rosenberg of Nonviolent Communication says something about bad behavior is the result of a tragic expression of an unmet need. And I also think that sort of along that, somewhere in that same realm, is that bad behavior results from people not being able to acknowledge and accept the reality of their own feelings, or their own suffering would be the other word. Suffering sounds like such a big word, but really, if you just think of it as struggle or difficulty. So, I think about the most mundane example of, you have this piece of trash and there's a recycling bin on the other side of the park, and there's just a garbage can in front of you. And there's some part of you that says, I should really put this in the recycling, but it's all the way over there. And, what difference is it going to make? It's just one piece of trash, and you put it there, and then you also feel guilty because you just did that. And nobody wants to sit and feel guilty.
Right.
And so you find a way to distract yourself. And as soon as you feel that uncomfortable feeling, you direct your attention away. You distract yourself. You tell yourself it's no big deal, whatever it is. So it's actually those of us who can be in tune with what matters to us and what those feelings, could we actually accept them and let them not drive us out of guilt, but out of love. In other words, this act of taking this piece of trash to the other side of the park is an act of love. It's an act of love. And it's not just like for some sort of vague sense of the earth, as if somehow this piece of trash is going to save the world. But it is an expression of love, just like every little expression of love that you have for the person that you love. A little, a look, a caress, a comment, a smile, they're all part of the expression of love. And it sounds all kind of airy fairy and whatever, but I think it has very practical applications. If we're in tune, if we care enough, we act in accordance with our values. And that's the other piece here, is that self-compassion actually helps us to stay in tune with what's important to us. We suffer when we're out of line with that. And so we're suffering if what's important to us is a healthy, safe environment, and we're contributing somehow to the opposite of that. When we're in tune with that value, when we're really following it like a compass, then we act in alignment with it.
Agree. It makes me, when you're talking, while you're talking, it made me think of one of the pillars of self-compassion, which is an awareness of a common humanity, the fact that we have a shared humanity and common experiences. And so I wonder if you would comment on common humanity and how it relates to interconnection. What I mean by the question is this: I feel and I believe that every life is interconnected with all of life. And so when I act in accordance with that awareness, I feel like I'm meeting the needs of others and of myself and of the one. So as you said, Marshall Rosenberg's quote, it's a tragic expression of an unmet need. I mean, if we're tuned into the needs of others, if we're tuned into the needs of life, if we're tuned into the needs of the earth and all its living ecosystems, and we live in that awareness with kindness towards all life, it seems to me that we would be living according to our values and what's really important to us, and be meeting our own needs. So is there something you could say about that sense of interconnection, and how if we live within that sense, maybe we would be living more ecologically, sustainably as well?
One of the challenges, I think, is that having had a chance to talk to a lot of people in front of a lot of people, I know that when you start to talk about how we are all interconnected, um, some of us resonate, and a whole bunch of us think their eyes glaze over. They think this is some sort of weird, new age, mystical. My brother, who's a police officer, calls it that weird California hippie stuff, we'll just say. Um,
Right.
so, but I think we have to put the lie to that. And what I mean by that is that, first of all, we are all human and we actually need each other, whether you want to call it interconnected or not. We're born helpless. We would not survive if our parents just birthed us and left us to our own accord. It's not like little turtles that are, eggs that hatch in the sand and they pop out and just waddle down into the water and go about their life. Our
Right.
kids stick around a lot longer, sometimes way too long, but that's a separate topic. So we are born needing each other, and when we're successful in getting our needs met, we survive. So we want to be loved, because when we get loved as an infant, we get food, clothing, and shelter. And over time, we need people all the way around, right? I always think about, when I was a little kid, maybe you did this too. I get mad at my parents and I'd say, I'm going to run away from home, and I'd pack up a few things and I don't know what I thought I was going to do, but I thought I was independent, and
I
headed
have done
off
that.
with,
I did do that as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. And how'd that work out? Yeah. It, there's a whole learning experience. But the point is, we all need what, even if we're going to go live in a cave, we can only pull that off for so long. And we still need other people for the food that we eat, for the clothes that we wear, for all of the different things. And that's okay. And so when we acknowledge that, that's the interconnection, that we are social beings. We're actually wired neurologically to be attuned to each other. That's why, I can sense when you're, uncomfortable or happy or scared or whatever, and you can do the same for me, even over the internet. And there are these structures that are still yet to be fully understood called mirror neurons that show that our brains are literally wired to attune to other people's emotional states. And that helps us, it helps us as a mother knowing what does our child need. It helps us to navigate in the world. So we're all in this together. And when we take an action in the world, it has an impact of some sort in every other person. So we all have a sort of shared responsibility and a shared opportunity to contribute. And so when we say sort of, well, what's good for me? If we realize that me is a part of we, then what's good for me is good for all of us. Or what's good for all of us is good for me, is maybe another way of looking at that. So when we're looking at that, then suddenly our action, whether it's the piece of litter or letting the water run longer or whatever, is not an isolated incident that just has to do with me. It is something that has an impact on everyone. And uh, and by sort of like seeing ourselves not as a guilt thing, but as a collaborative effort, our part of being a member of the human race, the human family, we all do our part. And so then we tend to take actions that are in alignment with our values, like you were saying, because those values are our shared values.
So I appreciate what you just said, and you said just now, not out of shame or guilt, and I think that's really an interesting point, and I'd like to kind of underscore that a bit. That I think when we are aware of our common humanity with others, when we're aware of the fact of our interdependence with all of life, how we depend on water, how we depend on air, how we depend on the plants for our every breath, this deep sense of interdependence. I would like to believe that awareness engenders a great appreciation, a great sense of interconnection, and that because we're so interconnected and I'm so grateful for all that life has given me, I want to celebrate that and give back to life or contribute to life, not because I feel guilty or shame, but because I want to contribute to life. And I think that's one of the deepest experiences that we have as human beings, is that the more we contribute to life, the happier we feel, the better we feel, the more motivated we are. And so I appreciate the points that you've made in that regard.
Just adding to that too, I mean, I kind of skated past this kind of quickly early on, but I mean, I really operate on this fundamental assumption that we, each of us on this planet, with rare exceptions, simply want to be happy and free from suffering. Our
Mm.
natural state, our ground of being, is one of compassion and kindness. Um, and some of us go about pursuing that in sort of twisted, hurtful ways, and that's a whole separate thing. But if you go on that assumption, you know what that really means is that we just want to be happy, we want to be safe, we want to be secure, which includes living in an environment that supports that. We all want that. Now we lose touch with it for various reasons, and a lot of times it's these difficult experiences that we have that leave us with difficult emotions, and you know, a little bit of guilt turns into a guilt storm because of past experiences that we've had. But if we can kind of continually return to the ground on which we grew, this just wish to be happy and free from suffering, it, nothing else makes sense but to take care of the people around us and the environment around us. You know, only there's a poem called Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye, and she says something in there about, in the end, it's only kindness that makes sense anymore. And that's where when we can drill down below those layers, the sedimentary defense and all of the hurt that's piled up in our lives, and shame and guilt and things underneath, there is just this goodwill, this universal goodwill. And when we're connected to that, we take better care of everything.